Hello, and welcome to the Arctic Climate Game Jam. My name is Jessica Brunicini, and I'm the Assistant Director for the Polar Climate Change Education Partnership. We're so excited that you're participating in this event. Your site is one of 15 Arctic Climate Game Jams taking place around the US, Canada, and the Pacific Islands. Before you get started making games, I wanted to tell you a little bit about what motivated us to run this event. And to help me do that, I have a few special guests. So first, let's hear from Peg Steffen from the National Oceanographic and Atmospheric Administration. Take it away, Peg.
Thanks, Jessica. Let me share my screen here. Well, we're really excited to have you join us for this great challenge. And this was brought up about several years ago that we needed to have some energy around climate change, and gaming seemed to be a good way to do it. Climate change, of course, is one of the greatest challenges of our time. We do know that it's real and it's happening. Most scientists agree that it is happening and that it is us. We know there are serious implications for humans and all the ecosystems of the Earth, and this one is going to focus on the Arctic, of course. And we know that there are some solutions and that they can be implemented, but it will take a lot of work. So what's NOAA's role in this? Well, we're very interested in Americans' health, security, and well-being, and we do a lot of observations that are related to atmospheric and oceanic research, but also tied to climate and weather. And so we're trying to monitor how climate conditions are changing, and then we're trying to make that information available to the public in various ways. One way that it can be displayed to the public is through a game. And so several years ago, in 2015, in October, we actually organized our first Climate Game Jam with the help of 11 sites around the country. There was a kickoff event that was hosted at the White House and at the California Academy of Science. And over the weekend, there were 30 games that were completed and videos submitted. These are all the different sites that were on the first Game Jam. We thought that it was very successful. We had a showcase at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History, and many of these folks had their games showcased and play tested at that showcase event. Well, we thought that that was such a great event for focusing attention on climate change and possible solutions that we decided to have another one. So the next spring, we had the Climate Game Jam for water. And at this time, we had 9 sites, and we opened it up from junior high to college. We did some Google Hangouts that showcased some of the experts behind water data and problems with water usage and supply. And again, the winners were invited to showcase their games at the Smithsonian Museum of Natural History in Washington, D.C. The partners in that case were these folks here, and some of you are on this list, and we're excited that you're going to be part of the third Game Jam that we'll be having, focused on the Arctic climate research. And I just want a quick reminder, I know you will find a lot of information on climategamejam.org, but the digital is not the only way that you can produce games. And so I want to encourage, if you're a site coordinator or you're a site person, that you have lots of tools available to you to create games. They don't have to be digital. They might even be paper prototypes that become digital, or they are a board game. But we want to encourage you, at whatever level of technology and knowledge that you have for game design, that you get involved, you learn about the Arctic science, and that you generate a game that other people would find fun to play. So I will turn this back to Jessica. Thank you again for joining our Game Jam.
Thank you, Peg. Next, we'll hear from Stephanie Furman, who's an Arctic scientist at Columbia University.
Great, so I'll share my screen now as well. So Peg did a great job of explaining why a climate game jam. And what I'll be doing here today is saying why an Arctic climate game jam. And the slides that I'll be showing to you are mainly taken from this terrific resource for your sites. It's called Arctic Matters, and it was produced by the National Academy of Sciences. So why an Arctic climate game jam? Well, the Arctic is warming first and fastest. You can see in the map on the top right the temperature trend from 1950 to 2014, and clearly the Arctic is warming faster than the rest of the globe. And in the graph down below, all of the models show that the Arctic is going to be experiencing tremendous warming in the future, much more so than any other place on Earth. Now, what are the impacts of these changes? Well, if we take a look at what we've been seeing so far in terms of ice melting, which of course, when you warm something, the ice is going to melt. What you can see here is one of the first indicators is what's happening to Arctic sea ice. And the area of summer sea ice has declined by more than 40% since the late 1970s. This trend has accelerated since 2007. As climate scientists, as sea ice scientists, we were really shocked at how much ice was lost in 2007, and the trend is just continuing now. What about the glaciers, land ice? This is also melting, and it's melting at a rapid pace. You can see in the graph just how quickly we're losing ice mass on Greenland, but it's not just Greenland that's losing ice. It's also on glaciers in Alaska and other places around the world as well. Snow cover is also declining, and you can see the departure from normal from June 2015, how much less snow we had, and then in the graph you can see the decline from the 1970s when we had more snow to a much less snow cover today. And permafrost is thawing. So permafrost is called permafrost because the soil had been permanently frozen in the past. But now, because of the warming, it's thawing, and we're seeing incredible erosion because of the permafrost thaw. Especially along the coastline, you can see where the warmer ocean waters are coming up along the coast, and you're seeing infrastructure loss and habitat loss as well. Talking about habitats, many Arctic ecosystems are being affected already by climate change. And you can see on the image of the walrus. Walrus like to rest on ice and to drift, hull out to rest in between diving to the bottom of the sea to search for clams. And that image on the top left where you see all those little brown dots, those are actually walrus who came ashore because they could not find ice to rest on. These changes in the ecosystems and the habitats are clearly affecting the people of the Arctic. About 4 million people live in the Arctic, including city dwellers, oil prospectors, hunters and herders, and indigenous groups whose ancestors have lived in the Arctic for millennia and have become used to the types of conditions that we used to have, and now we're having to adapt to the world that's basically melting out from underneath them. What happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic, though. So far I've been talking about changes that have happened within the Arctic. These changes in the Arctic are actually affecting us around the globe. So the melting land ice on Greenland that I showed you, that tremendous loss of ice, is moving ice and water from the land to the sea. This causes sea level to rise. If all of Greenland ice sheet were to melt, that would be 23 feet of sea level rise around the world. So there's a tremendous amount of ice that's stored on land that affects coastal areas around the world. What happens in the Arctic doesn't stay in the Arctic with respect to ecosystems as well. People know about migrating birds, but you might not realize that the birds that are in your bird feeders are actually connected to the Arctic through migration routes. Many of them go from actually the Antarctic to the Arctic, which is this incredible migration. And because they're doing this to tap into the very high productivity that we have in the polar regions. Feedback loops accelerate the pace of climate change. So the loss of the white reflective surfaces, the glaciers, the snow, the sea ice, when that snow and ice shrinks, a darker surface is revealed, the tundra, the open ocean, that absorbs more sunlight. And that means that the reflectivity will decrease, causing more heat to be absorbed. It's like a driveway or a sidewalk that is dark, and it absorbs more heat, and so melts the ice around it. Permafrost. We talked about this in terms of the erosion, but it also stores carbon. When that stored carbon is released through thawing, that can actually add to the greenhouse gas emissions, and that can cause further warming. So this is another way that there's a feedback loop where the thawing, the melting of the Arctic can affect the entire globe. Arctic wildfires are increasing as well, and when the wildfires burn plant material, they release carbon, and the charred ground is obviously darker than what the ground was like before. So both of these effects also exacerbate the warming. Into the future, what we're going to have to deal with is a wide range of changes. We talked about some changes to habitat loss, but also as the Arctic is increasingly more accessible, as we have less ice, both on land and at sea, many companies, many industries, many countries are interested in extracting resources from the Arctic. The Northern Sea route for shipping, for transportation, tourists are interested in accessing areas that they haven't been able to access in the past. This poses both opportunities and also risks. Many insurance companies are saying it's not a question of if there's going to be a spill or an accident, but when. So this is posing challenges for communities and governments. The increasing exploration and exploitation of Arctic resources has both economic ramifications within the countries, but also outside, and also geopolitical implications too. There's new roles for Arctic residents, and there's increasingly concerns about national security in the far north. So what can we do? One of the things that we found through our work with the Polar Learning and Responding Climate Change Education Partnership is that friends and family are second only to scientists as trusted sources of information about climate change. And yet, other research has shown that 7 in 10 Americans rarely or never discuss global warming with their family and friends. So one of the best things you can do is actually talk to family and friends about climate change, and games can be a great way to start a conversation. Another thing we can do is thinking about how can we adapt to these changes. So my own research has focused on the last sea ice area. This region is north of Canada and Greenland, and it's the area that there's a scientific consensus that we're likely to have sea ice for the longest in summer of any region in the Arctic. And so one thing we can do in terms of adapting is to manage and recognize this place as a special area. Another thing we can do is to reduce the global warming, which will reduce the warming in the Arctic. So the first and foremost thing is to reduce carbon dioxide pollution. We can reduce carbon emissions through renewable energy and energy efficiency. We can also invest in carbon capture and sequestration, which can withdraw some carbon dioxide from the atmosphere and store it underground. Increasingly, people are also turning to questions about solar radiation management. The National Academy of Sciences did a study a couple of years ago where they looked into new research that could be conducted on ways to increase Earth's natural reflection of solar radiation by putting white surfaces up, like we've had in the past with the snow and ice. Many of these topics, as I said, the slides are taken from this Arctic Matters report, but there's also a great interactive service, or this great interactivity on the web where you can access this and you can find out more about each of these different topics. So with that, I'll turn this back over to Jessica.
Thanks, Stephanie. That was great. Lots of useful information. And last but not least, we are going to hear from Sarah Cornish from Games for Change.
All right, thank you, Jessica. Hello, and nice to meet you all. So Games for Change is the leading advocate of games for social impact. We create challenges and run events promoting the power of games for good. We've worked with NOAA and the Polar Partnership on game design challenges, and we're so excited to support this Arctic Game Jam. We believe so much that these games can, as Stephanie said, start conversations that are really, really important. So there's sort of a history of games being used to kind of combat climate change, to understand how climate is affecting changes in our planet, and to kind of explore and teach young people and old people about these different aspects of climate change. So there are a bunch of games, many of which have been made by the Polar Partnership, EcoChains, Future Coast, Smartic Simulation. We definitely encourage you to check those out for inspiration, as well as games like Eco and Blockhood, which were finalists in a climate game challenge that we hosted with the Polar Partnership last year. So I want to talk a little bit about why games. Why are we running this game jam? Why are we encouraging you to use games to fight this, to fight climate change? Well, the games industry is huge. It's bigger than television and music combined. The average age of gamers, it's not young people, it's not young boys. It's the average age of a gamer is 35. 45% of people who play video games are female. So really, it's all of us. And around the world, people play video games over 3 billion hours a week. So we strongly believe, and I know everybody on this call does too, that we can harness that incredible commitment and passion toward using games to tackle real-world issues. We know that games are an interactive medium. You have to lean in and engage. You make your own decisions. So the player agency piece makes games a really, really great way to raise awareness about issues, to educate people, to support research, and even change behavior. So we've seen this amazing kind of interest come out of government agencies like NOAA, like NASA, the National Institute of Health, the World Wildlife Fund. Top universities and governments are supporting game projects to support campaigns and to conduct important research. And top game developers like Ubisoft, Microsoft, and others are developing new games about real issues, about education. Games like Dumb Ways to Die, you might have played, have gone viral with over 126 million views and 70 million plays, increasing safety knowledge around trains and actually reducing train deaths. So you can really raise awareness about issues. Games like the iCivics game platform have reached over 10 million middle school students across the country in all 50 states, increasing how kids learn about government and understand how to engage in civics. And then there's citizen science games. So games like Fold It and iWire, and more recently the game Sea Hero Quest, have helped scientists conduct really kind of rapid speed research by crowdsourcing protein folding puzzles, mapping the human brain, understanding dementia and navigation. And then games like some of the games coming out of a lab in California are helping Alzheimer's patients rewire their pathways, or kids get over ADHD. And then, of course, behavior change, which is what we're all interested in when we talk about climate change, is helping to explain what's happening and what we can do about it. And so we think that games are the amazing way to reach people and start conversations. And so I would encourage you to get out and play games. You can come to our website, gamesforchange.org/play, to explore some games, get some ideas about games that are out in the world, problem solving. I also hope to see you all at the Climate March this weekend. There are marches in DC, New York, all over the country and the world. And we are so excited at Games for Change to see all of the games that you make for this Arctic Game Jam. So good luck, and let's play.
Thanks, Sarah, and thanks to Stephanie and Peg as well. And thanks to all of you for participating. We're looking forward to seeing what kinds of games you come up with. Good luck, and most importantly, have fun.